I've been in Peru, at least not the airport. I've spent a lot of time in the Lima airport going to Chile, but where I did a lot of work. But it's been many years since I actually stopped in Peru, so I'm very happy to be back here. Let me give you a little outline of this talk. It's really three subjects. First, an introduction to sort of the concept of resilience and how it applies to architects, planners, engineers. Second, some lessons about resilience from our disaster recovery experience around the world. And third, some opportunities for advancing resilience for design and planning. And I mean that in the broadest sense. I mean, within engineering, within all of the sort of the fields that touch the built environment. So first of all, just to think about what is resilience. We know that our urban societies are at risk. Just imagine California without Los Angeles. Imagine Peru without Lima. An urban disaster resilience is to have a society that functions after an earthquake or any other kind of disaster. It's essentially to adapt and survive and grow no matter what kind of shock there is. And that's the sort of idea, the basic concept of resilience. Now, for us, the built environment starts under the ground with pipes and sewers and water lines. And then on top, we have roads, we have houses, we have offices, we have factories, we have industry, we have freeways and other kinds of infrastructure. All of these things are the things that we in the sort of larger design professions work on, have influence over, or they're part of our lives. So we can say that what we work on is the critical infrastructure: water, electricity, gas, telecommunications, telephones, buildings. But there's more to it than that. In a city, you also have other kinds of systems that are really necessary for life. You have transportation, supply chains, repairs and maintenance. You have banking and finance. You have schools, businesses and jobs, healthcare and safety. You have people's emotional well-being. All of these things are part of the system of a city. So if you want to have resilience, all of these often depend on the built environment, but they also have functions and things that have to happen that are needed for resilience. So we're really talking about the interrelationship between those physical components and all of those other systems that we need for our lives. So with that, take that as a basic definition. Now let's step back and think why this is important. And it's really because of what we learned from recovering from disaster. It requires repair and rebuilding of all of that physical stuff, all of those things that are damaged. But it's also about rebuilding the economy, the government, services, jobs, schools, healthcare, the life of the community. It's a lot of design and construction, but often over what you would like to be a short window of time, it often isn't. But it's also this social process. It's a change. You have to readapt. It's not going back. You never get the city the way it was before. It's peaceful. Those people, for a generation, their lives have changed. Nothing is the same ever again. So how do you move forward? How does the city change with all of these things? And what really drives how fast you can recover? This is assuming that you haven't done much, right? This is just, you have the disaster and you haven't exactly planned for any resilience. Just to have good physical rebuilding, you need good economic conditions. So if you're in a place where there's not a good economy to start with, we had this case in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. So it was very hard to recover because the economy was already poor. Businesses were already leaving before the hurricane. You need good entrepreneurship. You need money, available capital. You need really predictable and functional local processes. People have to know how to get a building permit. Are they going to be allowed to build here? What is this? How does it work? You need very clear government assistance, no ambiguity about the rules. And you need it to be somewhat distributed. The more concentrated the damage in one place, the harder it is, because everything has to be done in that one place simultaneously. And on the sort of social system side, you really need the community involvement. You need to understand what people want. How is their lives going to change? You often have to redesign very complex infrastructure. Should you make it work better than it worked before? You know, if there was a bad transportation system, wouldn't you like to fix it while you are fixing it? You need good information from government. You need reinvestment in jobs. You need investment in housing. All of these things contribute to how quickly you might be able to recover. But in fact, it can be very much slowed down by how disruptive the systems are. You know, water, power, transportation. The more the infrastructure is disrupted, the slower recovery. And the more those other systems are disrupted, if the schools are really not functional and the healthcare isn't functional, are people going to stay? I don't think so. And also concentration of losses, which I mentioned. So what you see here on top are the 3 examples where there was a very short recovery time. Those are the outliers. Everything else is sort of 5, 10, 20 plus years. That's the norm. That's how long it takes. Just don't believe anything else. These others, there are special reasons why they did it faster, and we'll talk about those. But mostly it's really about a whole generation process. And that's painful and slow, and it affects people's lives. Is it about money? There are many ways to do it. Some use, on this side, a more centralized system, a tax or an insurance scheme or international aid. That doesn't, just because the money is there, doesn't guarantee that the work gets done quickly. In other places, it's much more, they're more market-based, and it depends on private investment, small amounts of insurance, mostly small amounts of government assistance. You can have better or worse. It's not determined. You need capital, but it doesn't determine how the speed goes. Everything else matters more: the processes, the entrepreneurship, the economy, etc. So some short examples. I'll try and go through these relatively quickly. Hurricane Katrina is not an earthquake, but it's an important event in the United States. 2005 impacted the entire Gulf Coast of the U.S. There were almost 2,000 deaths. New Orleans was particularly damaged, with over 100,000 housing units lost, and 80% of the residents had to be evacuated. The losses were very large, over 150 billion US dollars, and yet a tiny percentage of the U.S. gross domestic product. This is important when you compare it to other events. So the rest of it was a huge devastation for New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. The rest of the country barely knows. But what's important was the law. This was one of those cases where so much housing was lost. There was truly nowhere for people to live in. Every neighborhood, 20 to 50% of the houses were completely destroyed, and many of the rest were damaged. But there were also, the schools were destroyed, the hospitals weren't working, there was no health care. Universities who even tried to reopen couldn't, because no faculty would come back. Because they said, I'm not going to live here. I have nowhere to send my children to school. So by 7 years later, 2012, the population of New Orleans was still only 80% of what it had been before the event, and now it hasn't changed very much. They still have this picture of the bulldozers. In about 2 years ago, the mayor decided he would just tear down 40,000 derelict houses because no one was ever going to fix them. They just bulldozed them. 40,000 empty houses. But there was some planning, but it came very late. They had 2 plans that were done by government from a distance, complete failures. And then the 3rd plan that was done with community involvement, with people who were really working in the community, with citizen participation, called the Unified New Orleans Plan. That became the moment when there was real planning going on. And 10 years after the event, it's a good time to measure things. So the government, the Corps of Engineers rebuilt all the levees. Those were finished took 10 years, but those were finished. And the small downtown began to be revitalized, so some tourists would come back and would go there. But the rest of New Orleans is, to this day, devastated. And the houses are still a huge problem. There are still mostly empty lots. And if you look at this from an economic perspective, these 2 cities, Nashville and New Orleans, were on, this is the pointer, right? Let's see. Which one is the pointer? Oh, okay. So they were but Nashville and New Orleans were on the sort of same economic trajectory. Here is 2005. Nashville continues. This is the financial crisis. But Nashville's doing very well. This is New Orleans. The difference is in economic losses is about $105 billion, the difference between those 2 cities. That's the impact. Above and beyond the physical costs, the repair costs, that's the economic impact to the city. So these are really important numbers. When we talk about not wanting to go through this again, this is what we need. We don't want to suffer this again. And here's another example from New Zealand. The Christchurch actually had a series of earthquakes. They started in September of 2010. The most devastating was the one in February 2011, but they continued to have seismic activity for another 2 years. There were 13 declared disasters where they had to actually inspect and re-look at all the buildings. This one was a relatively small magnitude, 6.3, but it was epicenter directly under the downtown. Happened at 1 in the afternoon, just as people were going out to lunch. And it was a very devastating earthquake in terms of the kinds of, oops, sorry, I want to hit 2 buttons twice. When I try to use the pointer, the physical damage both to modern concrete buildings and masonry, but also to the ground. I mean, the soil losses were incredible. So this is what Christchurch looked like before the earthquake and during the earthquake. A stationary camera happened to capture that image. And this is after. This is the downtown, about a kilometer and a half square. This was taken in 2013. Most of these buildings are now down. The downtown, that area was cordoned off for 2.5 years. There was no access to it. Because there were so many collapse hazards in the space, it was very dangerous. There were 1,800 buildings that were ultimately demolished, in part because even if your building wasn't so badly damaged, after 2.5 years of sitting empty, and you had insurance, it was easier to take the insurance and walk away than to try to do the repairs. So you suddenly have a vacant downtown, or so-called downtown, and yet the losses were fairly typical, 50% residential, 25% commercial, 25% government, that's normal. But you needed new roads. All the roads had to be rebuilt. All the water supplies had to be rebuilt. All the sewer lines had to be rebuilt. They had to do rezoning for housing. They had to buy out people. Of the 1,800 demolished, there are 87 new buildings to date, and that's almost 10 years ago now. It'll take a couple of decades more to really begin to see that downtown come back. And in the housing, virtually 80% of the houses in the city were damaged. The severe liquefaction, Christchurch is a swamp, so they had lots of liquefaction. And then where they had rock, it fell. Rock falls in the hills were very dramatic. So they had insurance. Again, there was money, but the management of something of that scale, when there were continued earthquakes and therefore continued damage, almost overwhelmed their bureaucracy. I mean, it was almost impossible, and there are still people waiting to finish repairs on their houses. An important lesson that came from Christchurch was that because of all of this severe liquefaction, they had to do a lot of geotechnical evaluations. And the young geotechnical engineers who were working on this said, we're getting all this information, let's make a database. And so they put all the borings data together on a map, and it was public, and you could share it. And so if you put information in, you were able to take information out, and it helped the whole engineering community work more efficiently. And then when they had all this information, they also had the red zone was where the damage along the river, which you can see, was so severe, they felt they couldn't even begin to replace infrastructure there. They did a buyout, so that was about 15,000 families that they bought out and had them moving elsewhere. But the others, they had 3 more zones, and you looked up these zones, you typed your address in, and you were told what zone you were in, and you had different requirements for your foundation depending on what degrees of liquefaction. But if you think about this from an engineering perspective, from a civil engineering perspective, this is a radical change from the way we do building codes, right? To have site-specific regulations based on soil conditions is very unique, and it's really timely. We need to think this way when we think about resilience, because in fact, if you're in a highly susceptible liquefaction zone, you should have a different kind of foundation. It would help. And again, this was a city where the citizens were phenomenal about being supportive of their city. And they had a temporary cathedral built out of paper. They had this, because the downtown was bad, they had a mall made out of shipping containers. This thing is so popular, they're never going to take it down. It is packed every day of the year. And now we're copying it in the U.S. There are cities who are building these on parking lots because they're so popular. They had some citizens, they had all this material coming in on pallets. They would just dump them on a vacant lot. The citizens painted them and turned it into a marketplace, a farmer's market, places for music. They did whimsical street furniture, and they would take any old recreational vehicle they could find and turn it into a bar or a coffee shop in some of the vacant lots. I mean, this is how the community reacted to try to keep people in the city, and that was very important to the process. And in Japan, the Tohoku example was a huge offshore earthquake with a tsunami and also a nuclear plant meltdown. So they had a huge set of problems. They had much less structural damage to modern buildings, but they had enormous losses from the tsunami, And then they also had all the people who were in the path of the radiation who had to be evacuated. So they had another set of problems. And the government's response was more like the U.S. They invested in infrastructure. In New Orleans, we rebuilt the levees and we rebuilt the freeways. In Japan, they built miles of seawalls along the Miyagi coast. It's like, I mean, you see the people on the tiny little people on the top of this thing. This is enormous, and it goes miles and kilometers and kilometers. It's huge, and this was the fifth. I took this photo on the 5th anniversary. It's still not done, and they didn't even begin building housing until about then. So people were living in, very difficult temporary housing conditions for a very long time, and this was more than 5 years. And of course, they still have a huge set of recovery problems around where the contamination is and where the bread, where they will never be able to go, and they will have to do a buyout. Some areas which are restricted from 20 to 50 years, and others restricted 20 years. I mean, those families are gone, right? They're never coming back to those places. It's not going to happen. And now, the Latin American example from Chile is one of those outliers, one of the ones where the recovery happened quickly. Very different than almost everywhere else. So why? Interestingly, the difference between the Chile earthquake, where the dollar value of the losses, and in both cases a very high percentage of the gross domestic product, in both countries about 20% of GDP, and both had money. In Chile they did a government tax. In New Zealand they had insurance. So they had the money for the repairs. Why are the time frames so different? The difference is really the concentration of losses. In Christchurch, it was all concentrated in a very small area. In Chile, it was spread over 500 kilometers and many, many, many towns. So it was in some ways easier to do the recovery because it were only Talca was the largest city that was damaged, and it was the only one that had some of the urban problems. And it was a little bit slower to recover. But everywhere else in the smaller towns, they were able to complete the work by some very clever ways of distributing funds and doing things locally. And they had low casualties, like New Zealand, like Japan. Well, Japan, low casualties from the earthquake. The casualties were from the tsunami. Because they had good engineered buildings in Chile, so there were only a limited amount of damage to the concrete buildings, but extensive damage in the older adobe, not surprising, but also extensive non-structural damage in hospitals and the wine industry and schools. And so how did they rebuild in 4 years? How did they do it? They used a tax on mining, an unaffected industry from the north, making the country pretty wealthy. They taxed mining for 4 years, and they used their existing government agencies, so the Ministry of Education fixed the schools, Public Works did the roads, whatever they felt like they had good channels for distributing money, and they weren't going to change that. So they used those channels. For the housing, which was the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, they had 220,000 houses. Half of them had to be housing units had to be completely rebuilt. Half brand new were lost, half were repairs. A good majority of them, more than 2/3, were on people's own sites. So they made a decision to actually help them rebuild on their sites and to not do any greenfield development outside. In these small towns, this was very important. People still had their jobs in agriculture. They didn't want to leave their communities. It kept them in their communities. And then they had things like social housing, and they used the opportunity of the kinds of repairs from the earthquake damage to actually also bring them up to higher standards, so for the social housing. So if you were living here in this older, when it was an older complex and you had a 25 square meter unit, when you went back, you had a 50 square meter unit. So they made social improvements as well as earthquake improvements. And they did a lot of adoption for historic towns so that they wouldn't completely lose the quality of life, but they had strong seismic standards. And in all of these, they enforced both seismic and energy standards across the board. That was a government decree. And they did a lot of the upgrading of this social housing. And in some cases, they had to build new where there were tsunami zones and things were lost. Those were built to high standards. They also had some clever ideas, like for Talca, where they really wanted to add some density to the urban sites to keep people from moving far out and keep more people in the towns. This was the hardest one to enforce because it took more than just building housing. It really took some more planning exercises that didn't work so well at the time. But they did also use the earthquake to bring together a lot of sort of coastal planning for future events, so that they were planning on future tsunamis. Yeah, they were designing for future tsunamis. This land, which was mostly devastated anyway, they did a buyout. It became park with tsunami controls and walls, and then parkland, infrastructure, commercial buildings that are elevated, and finally behind that, then the beginning of housing. So they were really trying to use this planning to sort of protect these coastal communities in the future. And then actually after this enormous 4-year construction effort, which actually finished in 4 years, it occurred to them that they hadn't done some of the kind of economic development and social planning and engaging, they could have done more of, and they're still undertaking a program called the Recupera Chile, trying to, in some, in the places that weren't doing so well, bring some economic development, do more social engagement to sort of help those communities continue to survive. And from all of these examples, I have kind of 7 lessons for recovery. The first 4 in the blue are the physical ones, and the next 3 are the sort of institutional ones, if you will. That, of course, if you have mitigation, right, if you have prepared things, brought things up to higher standards, it's going to improve recovery. It'll get faster. The infrastructure dependencies are absolutely critical to making recovery work, right? If you don't have the infrastructure, you haven't coordinated how you're bringing it back, that can make it slow. Housing is very essential, and some level of clear funding. This is the physical building side. On the administrative side, you really need good government leadership. But it needs to be centralized, but it also has to be in cooperation with the local community. It can't be a dictating sort of thing. You really need to manage information. That has to be ongoing. I mean, the folks in Chile said no matter how many times they were out there in the community talking to people, they were on television, it was never enough. You just have to keep explaining it all to people. Most people don't understand what this is. And also having some pretty clear functional rules and processes so that there isn't confusion about where you can or can't build, whether you're going to change those codes or not, what's going to happen. But ultimately, it has to be a process that enables citizens. It doesn't turn it into a kind of an entitlement program. People are fighting about how do they get more of something. And that's what we really learned from recovery is that it's long and painful and difficult, and that it's not easy to do it. So, there are things we can do to make it better, but we can't always shorten the time frame. So the concept of resilience is that, the event happens and you lose where you were from the initial impact. You got to prepare for recovery, and you have this slow climb back just to try to get back to where you were. What you really want to do is limit that loss and shorten the time. Right? That's what you're trying to achieve with resilience. You're trying to make it less damage and faster to repair. So how do you think about that? The opportunities and challenges are that for the last 100 years, all of our building and planning regulations have focused on minimum standards for life safety. We began doing codes in buildings when we didn't want people to die in fires, and we didn't want people to have bedrooms with no windows, and we didn't want them to get diseases because of sewage in the streets. That's how we got these standards in the first place. So now we're trying to rethink development in terms of resilience, and to think about it as almost recovery-based with the designing. You have to plan for those recoveries from shocks. And that means that the services that people rely on, the housing, the education, the commerce, they all depend on the built environment. So we need those codes and standards to include some acceptable recovery times as well as the safety that we've promised for so long. We need both of those things. We need the buildings to be safe. We also need them to be able to recover in an acceptable time. So how do we get there? That's the challenge and the opportunity. So here are 5 good ideas, what I think are good ideas for advancing the resilience. The first is to focus on infrastructure, because nothing happens if infrastructure doesn't work. Water, energy, communication, transportation, you need them. They often come from different providers. They're not all nationalized. In some cases in the U.S., we have some private providers and some public providers. They never talk to each other. So you have to get them to talk to each other. You have to get them to trust each other. You have to get them to share some information, to talk about how they're really going to behave in the aftermath of an earthquake. And you have to have them use their normal maintenance plans. All of these big systems have to have maintenance all the time. Well, over 50 years, you can do a lot to change the distribution of your water system or your water supply. You can improve the quality of the distribution system. The second is to focus on existing buildings. No matter how much we think about new codes for new buildings, 99% of the building stock is already here. We've got it. It's not going away until it falls down. So we really have to think of incentives for seismic retrofit and ways to strengthen some of that. Not all of it, but some of it at least. And when it comes to new construction, we really have to think about the building codes to include this idea of a functional recovery, that you have to do more than just make it safe. We have to really not give up on land use planning, because we should have these, like the examples from New Zealand, we should start to create these site-specific hazard regulations. I'm still shocked that we build in flood zones in the United States all the time without any compunction to stop the developers from doing that. Why are we letting people build in flood zones? Why are we letting people build on soils that we know are going to collapse and sink building, are going to liquefy? It doesn't make any sense to me. We know where these hazards are. And we have to really do more about public information. In the modern world, we get a lot of information about things. I'm kind of a health-conscious person, so, I read the labels on food. If you eat those things that my students eat all the time, power bars and all those energy bars that students eat late at night when they have to keep working and they're hungry. There's a really detailed list on the back of everything that's in them. You probably know more about what's in one of those energy bars than you know about what is in the house that you live in, right? Than you know about the soil conditions of the place that you live. What do you know about that. We don't know. Nobody knows anything about these things. Why not? Why isn't that on the web like everything else? So these are my 5 ideas. Let me show some examples. Quickly, I'll go through this. One on infrastructure. Huge amount of damage in New York after Hurricane Sandy. Oops, keep hitting the wrong button. In Hurricane Sandy, this was the inundation level in Manhattan. All of both airports, the ports, everything. The impact on the New York City subway was vast. Getting these infrastructure providers to actually coordinate and talk to each other was a really big deal. Because you want them to focus on changing and adapting, not just replacing all the things that are going to get damaged the next time there's a storm. And this is an interesting example from Rotterdam. They have a lot of flooding problems there. So they're building a park. So this is a very nice park. People play in it. It's also designed to be a water catchment in the event of a flood. But when the flood's over, it can go back to being, before the flood and after the flood, it can go back to being a park. This is the kind of thinking, adaptive thinking that we need in our infrastructure. And the other one is the Los Angeles Water and Power, which was mandated to do a 50-year resilience plan by the city government. In the current setting, almost all of their water, a third of their water comes from the LA aqueduct. This is the other aqueduct. So these things come out of the mountains and bring them the water, right? This is a city of what, 13 million people? These cross the fault 3 different times. What's going to happen? So these are going to get replaced, right? And the only other source, which is 12%, is some local groundwater. So in their planning, they have money to improve these pipelines, the big pipelines that come out of the mountains. But in the long run, what they're going to do is they're improving the supply network, the distribution network in the city. So every time they do maintenance, they use these special pipes that are seismic pipes that aren't going to break. So their distribution pipes won't break anymore. And those pipes, it turns out, have much lower maintenance than the ones they were using before, so they're much more efficient to run. And the other thing they're doing is looking at changing their water supply so that they depend less on the aqueducts and using recycled water, conservation, water transfer, stormwater capture. If they can think more creatively about how they do the water supply, they won't need as much and the city can continue to grow. That's resilience planning. So for the case of existing buildings, this is where public investment in seismic upgrades and research makes a huge difference. In California, after 1989 and 94, our 2 earthquakes, the state government invested in a huge university research program on transit because we had so much damage to the freeway infrastructure. So we have retrofitted every bridge and major overpass in California in the last 30 years. We have, that's this. We have we've retrofitted our BART system. It's not quite done yet, but we're still in the process of finishing that. And we have been doing the same with our water supply because we have the same problems as Los Angeles. It all comes from the Sierra Nevada mountains. And of course, of the buildings that were damaged, like city halls, our city hall, Oakland City Hall, Berkeley City Hall, these have all been base isolated, seismically improved. So we're not going to lose government function again. We had a law passed that all of our hospitals had to be upgraded, and that's all finished. So these are really important targeted retrofit programs of public infrastructure that will make a huge difference in the next round. There's also the mitigation of losses in residential construction. We take this very seriously in California. We have big programs to retrofit what we call soft story apartments. They're these wood frame apartment buildings with parking underneath and little skinny columns that always collapse. Those are all being retrofitted now, and that's all done with private money. But I wanted to show this because this is so relevant to Peru. We also have to reduce losses through better construction practices in confined masonry and adobe. And this is these photos are from Haiti, but they've been used all over the world. Work has been done in India. And it's really some simple, it's a small nonprofit that teaches locals to train themselves, basically, and train their construction workers so that they learn better techniques for masonry construction. And I think if you really want builders to adopt this kind of stuff, you have to give them some incentives. You can't just expect that they'll do it out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to, a little financial incentive or a little, extra development, an extra floor on the building goes a long way to getting people to change the way they do things. These are really important if we want to keep some of our residential construction safer. And then we really do have to change our new construction standards. The life safety thing is really not good enough. We need to sort of think about technical performance, and we need to think about these functional repair times. This is an example, because the whole issue, I'll just say, the notion of life safety is no longer sustainable. In a modern world where we live in cities, somewhere about 10 years ago, we crossed the threshold in the world where most of the world's peoples now live in cities. So this example from Japan is a very famous, architecturally famous building by Toyo Ito in Sendai. It's completed in 2000, very well designed to Japanese codes. That's what it looked like after the earthquake. So structurally, it was fine. There was no structural damage, but was it usable? No. It was going to take a long time just to do non-structural repairs. And the problem is what the earthquake design community says, well, life safety, it's earthquake resistant. That's what we know how to do. That's what our codes say. But the client and everybody out there in the public thinks that that building that's designed to the code is earthquake proof. And then they get really upset when they find out that it's going to be damaged, or it is damaged. This is no longer environmentally sustainable in our world, in an urban world. We just can't. We have to think differently. So we have this. We've changed the terminology. We've been struggling with what to call this in the United States. For a while, we were trying to say, well, there's this thing, immediate occupancy, but immediate occupancy is confusing because it really isn't continuous occupation like you have in the hospital. So the current term we're all struggling to get our minds around is called functional recovery. And it's a building code provision that includes a measurable state in which the functional capacity can be restored in an acceptable time frame. This is the sort of the way we're trying to define this term. And the reason we're using it is that we want to make it clear that it applies to everything. It applies to existing buildings, to new buildings, to infrastructure, to planning, but it also applies to sort of business continuity planning. We want universities and schools and hospitals to have functional recovery plans. How are they really going to operate after an earthquake? Inspection and repair protocols, recovery finance, construction plans, substitutions, backups, other kinds of strategies. We know we'll still have damage. We're never going to achieve some. Resilience is not some perfect state we're going to achieve. It's a path we're continually on because the world keeps changing. So not only is the question of how do we shorten the losses and the recovery, limit the losses and shorten the recovery time, but how do we plan to keep functioning? So it's sort of physical and administrative, right? You need both. So, you don't, like in a university, we've done this is what I created at Berkeley, a system where we did this. And we not only did seismic upgrades of buildings, and we built some new buildings, because new buildings are always improved. We built some of those buildings to very high standards so that they would be fully functional. we could accept, we decided what amount of damage we could live with, but then we had not only a business resumption plan, which would be a normal thing you'd expect to have, but also a teaching recovery plan, a research recovery plan. Can you share, who can share a lab and how is that going to work? Are there other universities? We figured out, for example, that there was no earthquake that would take out both Berkeley and Stanford at the same time, because the locations of the faults were on different faults. So we may compete with them over football, but really we can share labs when we need to. This has got to work both ways for both of us. And these are the kinds. This doesn't cost any money. This costs sitting down and talking to people and figuring it out. And that's really what this idea is about, this combination of things. It's about controlling for the evolving risk. That's really what it's about. And this is, even if you, in the developing country, this was a study a student of mine did in Nepal before the Nepal earthquake, if they could just improve the quality of residential construction standards, in 15 years, they could expect a 20% reduction in losses. And he modeled it all, to really detailed fragility curves for all the different states of the buildings. And then the last couple of examples, they're about land use planning and building hazard mitigation into all the on this. They're getting this stuff up on the web, it's accessible, it's address specific, it's very easy to find. You can just go on their city websites and find maps with things like the slopes that are the underground slopes, so you know where the old stream beds are, and it's got the property lines in the buildings on top of it. They've got all the soil conditions mapped to property lines. And if your property line happens to cross two, there's a little special thing which tells you which regulation you're required to comply with. This is a pretty radical change in how it is we do land use planning. And this is where I think we need to go. Now, we need good geotechnical basis to make it work, right? You need good technical information. You need the engineering information. But it is possible to do this. And I'd like to take it even one step further. I don't know if you have this in Latin America. They don't have it in Italy. There's this website called Zillow in a lot of North America, which is about real estate. And you can either go on there and type in an address or a neighborhood, and you can find out how much the rents are and how many buildings are for, how many apartments are for rent anywhere in that neighborhood or anywhere in the city. You can also see what properties are selling for. Why couldn't we type in the address and get the hazard information? Why couldn't we type in the address and find out what the structural rating is for that building? It would make a huge difference in public perception. I think we need to aim for that kind of mapping transparency. That's where I see the future in public information. And it all requires planning. It requires making the planning effort, getting people to sit down at the table and say, this is a policy we want to pursue. This has been pushed pretty hard in California. We have it in San Francisco and Los Angeles and a few of the other smaller cities. Another larger local city just adopted a resilience plan. We have a bill in our legislature requiring a functional recovery building code for California. It would be a miracle if it passes, but that getting it out there is part of the conversation, it's part of the planning. And all of this is about changing the focus from urban systems, from sort of what we do in the lab on the shake table, right, to what happens in a building, to like what happens in a campus. Now I'm saying let's go from that building and campus to the city and society. That's what we're really talking about with resilience. We're talking about thinking beyond our normal narrow path of just being focused on a particular building or a particular hazard, and studying it and saying, let's think about this in the larger context. And some of you may know this donut. This is Apple headquarters in Silicon Valley, built to the highest structural standards base, isolated. It's so redundant, it has everything, right? You know, they don't want those workers to stop working for 20 seconds. They want to make money, right? But I always say when I talk to them, and what happens when this happens at night and nobody can get to work tomorrow? Because the roads are going to still be in very bad shape, and your kids might not be able to go to school, and are they going to come to work? If the kids can't go to school? I don't think so. And, you know, as a company, they need to think beyond the workplace and start to think about the houses that their workers live in and how they travel. Not, you know, those big buses that they drive back and forth from San Francisco to Silicon Valley, that piece of roadway is going to be gone. Because while we fixed the bridges and the overpasses, we didn't fix the stuff on the liquefiable soil, and it's all on liquefiable soil. So, you know, they have to think a little more broadly as a company. This is an industry issue as well as a government issue. And it's also, I can't close without saying this, it's got to be multi-dimensional. Floods, fires, you know, it's all part, sustainability, sea level rise, this is all part of it. And our models have to include all of these things. The planning has to include all of these things. The infrastructure has to work no matter which bad thing happens. So a realistic framework has a series of key elements. First, the safe and functional physical environment. So this is our part. This is the part we focus on. Infrastructure, buildings, land use, geotechnical data. But it also has policy and implementation. And it isn't that we in the engineering and the technical community do that, but we have to be able to talk to people. We have to be able to explain why this matters. We have to be able to help people to understand and communicate the importance of these concepts. And this we don't do by just talking to each other. We do this by talking to civic groups and business groups and letting industry come to understand this. And we have to be accessible and we have to speak their language. We have to understand the things they care about as much as the things we care about in order to make this message go through. So to just conclude, I want to reiterate that resilience is both physical and institutional. It addresses the social and economic vulnerabilities in relation to the physical environmental risks. It really goes across systems and disciplines. It's adaptable over time. And it really requires some institutional change and planning. I mean, governments are going to have to make some changes. Businesses are going to have to make some changes. Our professional challenge is to adapt our design thinking and methods now so that we are really relevant for this future, which I really do believe is coming. And I think we have a lot to influence. So with that, I will answer questions, and thank you very much for your attention.